Hello everyone. On today's video, we're going to be taking a look at kind of late Soviet, sorry, early modern Russian SAM systems. Now, first of all, for the folks who took a look at the video last week, not 100% sure where that came from as far as that extra noise in the audio. Hopefully this week will be a little bit better for you. So, as you all know from the early days of surface-to-air missiles, the goal, of course, is to deny an enemy to use your airspace. And the Western powers usually deny airspace by using very, very sophisticated aircraft. The Eastern powers, looking for the more cost-effective route, would often employ SAM systems. In the really early days, and this is kind of like, I guess, call your single-digit SAMs from the Soviet Union especially, they developed a lot of systems that would have the ability to engage at all sorts of different ranges. Basically, each SAM system kind of had its own sweet spot. You know, like an SA-2 could get medium to high altitude, an SA-6 could do low to medium altitude. You had the SA-5, which had the S-200, which had the capability of firing at targets 200 nautical miles away, but they were garbage at low altitudes, and all those different techniques. Every single one of the SAM systems had the same limitation, however, and that was the fact they could not engage more than one target at a time. And some of the SAM systems actually could not fire more than one SAM missile, the actual missile itself, at a single target at a time. You know, your SA-2 could fire up to 3, and the SA-3 could fire up to 2. So with all these things in mind, the good folks, the Soviet engineers, the Russian engineers at the time, of both Anti as well as the other company as well, Amaz, that's the one I was thinking of, got to work in developing some SAM systems. The first one that came out of this is going to be your SA-10 if you're NATO, or the S-300P. I have the PT version right here, but the P version was the original. This system was staggeringly good. Basically, what you did is you took everything that worked really, really well in existing SAMs, and you basically combined it into one package. The actual SAM package looked a little bit like this. You had vertically launching missiles, which meant that you could just shoot them straight up. The missiles themselves were solid boosters only. There was actually no extra phase. Some of the early SAMs, like the SA-2 and the SA-3, actually had a little booster rocket on the bottom, which would kind of help getting it going. This thing is actually launched clear of its tube by a little gas generator in the bottom. Then it ignites and goes and chases its target down, which makes it able to engage in every direction almost instantly. The other thing we got out of this, of course, is we got the ability to mount our fire control radar in these really, really tall mobile masts. Notice I said the word mobile. These things were designed from the outset to be able to pick up and move around, which made them much, much more survivable. You also notice that we have this very, very nice search radar. This one's the Big Bird. I think that's the A model. We also have, of course, the tin shield, and we have all sorts of different variations of different systems. This thing not only was incredibly capable at engaging actual targets, but it gained the ability to attack 6 targets simultaneously, something we've never seen before. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this early S-300's capabilities. I'm going to go to my special actions. I'm going to press execute, press OK. And I'm actually going to do that a couple more times. Execute, execute. Okay, so we've just launched ourselves a total of 6 different targets. Now, to make things interesting for us, what I've actually done is I've changed the way that the scenario works so that the decoys themselves are actually going to be different types of decoys. These are actually F-16As. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and order a general attack here. I'm going to go ahead and allow him to fire, because if he doesn't fire, he's not going to do much here. And he's going to start working immediately. Now, this system has a basically effective range of about 25 nautical miles. And as you probably saw just a minute ago, its capability as far as engaging high-altitude targets is substantial. Let's see here, 125,000 feet, which is insane for a system that kind of came out in the early 80s. In the really, really early days of this system, it wasn't uncommon to call this thing, the Patriot, the Russian Patriot kind of a deal. One big difference from a gameplay perspective between this weapon and the Patriot is the fact that the Patriot can only be pointed in one direction at a time. The SA-10 gains the ability to actually shoot in 360 degrees direction at all time. And because of that, it makes it that much more lethal. This is actually pretty fun to watch because they basically shoot vertically. Yeah, there you go. You can watch this. They shoot straight up and then they start to arc around. You can see these 2 missiles are going to be flying directly for our angry guys down here, and this one's going to be going for higher altitude missiles. So notice we have the ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously, something we've never seen in a Russian-Soviet system so far. Again, this thing came out basically in the late 70s, early 80s. And you can see it. It's just working these guys over without too much effort at all. I'm going to fly this next one. I'll go ahead and change my mode real quick to make it a little easier to say. But notice I'm able to engage in every direction instantaneously and basically deny the enemy this airspace completely. Bam, we did it. Now, you're probably saying, well, that was pretty effective. Now, the targets that actually launched were F-16 drones with electronic countermeasures. So those should be pretty effective, but you can take a look from my initial 15 missiles, 6 F-16s. And again, these are very, very sophisticated F-16s with good electronic countermeasures. So that is the S-300. There's actually 3 or 4 different versions of this. This is called the A model of it. Later on, what you got was a different version, not the SA-12. Don't get this one confused. This is actually an anti. This is not an Alma. This is a different weapon. You later, of course, got the SA-20, which is a terrifying version. There's also the SA-10B, which is a modernized, much more mobile version of the SA-10. And of course, everybody's favorite, the S-400, is in the same family, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So basically, the SA-10 and the S-300, depending on which version you're dealing with, was a terrifying system. It was a very popular PLA system as well for those folks over on the way east coast of Asia. So let's take a look at other things that came out. So as you all know, you've probably seen the SA-6. The SA-6 is a very, very competent, capable system at engaging low to medium altitude targets. So that was a good system, except that it had 2 problems. The first of all is you had to make sure that the radar was pointed in the direction of the target, which meant, guess what? If you had targets coming from 2 different directions, the word is target saturation, you could not engage them both at the same time. And the second problem they had was the fact that your fire control radar and search radar was on the same chassis, which means if something happened to that, your entire battery was out of commission. They said, well, that sucks. Can we fix that? And they did, actually. So what they did is they actually mounted the fire control radar to the front of the Tellar, which gave them the ability to engage independent of the actual battery control center. So as a result, you suddenly had an SA-6 that had the same capabilities as the S-300, but just at a much shorter range. The other thing you'll notice is this thing's range is about 20 nautical miles, and its low altitude and high altitude capabilities is incredible. So let's go ahead and waste a couple more F-16s here. Go ahead and speed up time a little bit so they can get into range. It shouldn't take them too long. There we are. Go ahead and order up an attack. I have to make sure these guys don't fire, because if they do fire, they're just going to kind of start wasting missiles on me. Go ahead and order them to attack, so they're allowed to do so, and we're just going to speed up time a little bit. So again, imagine this, is each one of these batteries, each one of these little missile platforms having its own fire control radar. So our first guy, this guy's extremely high altitude, well, not extremely high, 25,000 feet. We've already got a missile on the way and without any effort at all. So this other guy, of course, is not quite in range yet, but I have a feeling it's going to go very poorly for this chap. That ECM is actually still fairly effective. Now notice, I can engage different targets because different parts of my battery are engaging separately. This is a very unique thing to this particular platform. It's something that you won't have in a lot of SAM systems that came before it. So in this case, we should have shot more than 2 or 3. This guy's only like 400 feet above the ground. So as a result, it's kind of difficult to hit him. Oh, we're getting a little close there. Now keep in mind, in the old days, you couldn't fire a SAM that close. Hey, we did it. Okay, so that is the difference between the SA-10, which again, this is like a theater SAM, and this one being, something more used on a divisional level. So, of course, time went on a little bit, and this other company called Anti basically said, hey, what about the Army? Like, I love the fact that your S-300 is wonderful, and it can protect air bases and factories in Moscow and everything like that, but we need something that we can actually drive around with, and we also kind of need something that's got a little bit of ballistic missile protection. Enter the SA-12, aka the S-300V, which is the Army version of the S-300. Believe it or not, this is a different weapon system developed by a different company. I know you're looking at it going, well, it looks an awful lot like an S-300. As a matter of fact, if I pull them up next to each other, you're going to look at them and say, are you sure? There it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, what's this? This is different. Believe it or not, the S-300 V1 here in this particular version has a fire control radar mounted to the missile launcher. Versus this system where the fire control radar is actually on a big stick, so we have to point it where we want it. That means if something happens to my big stick radar, I can still engage missiles on our own. You also notice is we have a lot of variety as far as different types of radars to use. The reason for this is we needed to develop a system that basically gave us the ability to attack high altitude as well as low altitude targets. So you can see my battery is just a little different. So this system, even though it looks so much like the original S-300, is actually its own beast. And it's also very, very capable against ballistic missiles. So to prove my point with that, I'm going to go ahead and grip my SA-12 here. I'm going to go ahead and say, shoot at anything you want. It'll be fine. I'll go ahead and grip myself a handy dandy some drones here. Press OK. And I'm also going to turn on my search radar here, which is going to be critical because when I launch a ballistic missile at it, I want it to kind of know that it's going to get shot at. So let's get my SS-26, which is an extremely capable ballistic missile system. And we're going to make this guy's day, just to demonstrate the differences in performance between these two weapon platforms. All right, let's grab my SA-12. Again, this one is the Army version of the S-300, if you want to think about it. Designed to be a little bit more mobile and a little bit more capable against ballistic missiles. Notice, though, that the range of this particular version is virtually the same. Now, if you put the two in the same room together, oh, there's the ballistic missiles. It didn't take them long to be identified. Check it out. We're actually identifying them with the IR cameras of the later versions of these SAMs, not by the radar control platforms, which that bothers me just a little bit, if you ask me. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say engage. Now, keep in mind, these are not normal ballistic missiles. These are very highly specialized, extremely capable. They actually maneuver in the atmosphere. Very, very, very difficult to engage weapons. So we're sitting here. I'm going to go ahead and pause for just a second so you can understand how complicated of a shooting system there is. So right now, these ballistic missiles, as they're re-entering, are traveling too fast to be engaged. So in this particular case, I think I picked a ballistic missile that's a little too good for this because it's going to splatter that SA-12. Ooh, yuck. I should have picked a Frog 7 or something a little bit slower. So, well, we lost one. Oh, well, it happens. Okay, so let's take a look now at the SA-13. So if you remember back in the old days, we had this thing called an SA-9, which was basically this little teeny tiny amphibious car that had a couple IR missiles on the roof. It was okay. Like it could do the job most of the time, but unfortunately, because of its design and arrangement, it was very difficult to engage targets that were too high up or targets that were not facing them directly. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to grab my S-300 here and ask him very nicely to finish this job here. There we go. Okay. So this particular system, if you want to imagine if the old version, let me make sure I'm on hold fire, I don't want to accidentally fire. So this particular platform here was the same thing as an SA-9. It's just a heavily, heavily upgraded version of it. So you can see I've got, oh, those are reentry vehicles, so we don't want those. Go away, nobody likes you. Nobody likes you. See, the cool thing is if you go to God's Eye mode, you can actually delete things. And they're gone. Okay, cool. All right, this isn't my little drone, is it? Because if it is, I'll be really mad. I got my reentry vehicles confused with my drone. That's okay, though. All right, so we should have a couple drones on the way. Delightful. Let's grab my SA-13 again. Select these two as my targets. I'm going to go ahead and give them plenty, even though I'm really not going to need that many. That looks good. All right, let's speed up time a little bit, so watch the action. Zoom in just a teeny tiny bit here so we can see what's going on. Oh, by the way, we're in Ashuluk, Russia, which is where they actually test these weapons, so I thought that'd be appropriate. Okay, so this guy's traveling at 25,000 feet. Our SA-13 is looking up at him going, yup, that ain't going to happen. Meanwhile, notice our target that was flying directly at us at 400 feet, we've already fired at a missile in his general direction. Yes, this SA-13 is better than SA-9 because you can shoot at the target's nose now, as opposed to shooting it when it flies by. And believe it or not, these weapons are tremendously accurate and very useful. So you can see, not a bad system. Not a bad system at all. So, of course, speaking of SAMs and IR SAMs, that brings us to the SA-14, a.k.a. the Strela 3. This is the third version of the Arrow missile. Now, what makes this one a little bit different than the other one is it's a way better missile system. In the early days, as you know, you could only hit people in the tail. This one was basically an upgraded version of that. The concept, of course, being that you'd have a little bit more success with it. So go ahead and allocate tons of these. Usually you don't see these particular weapons kind of hanging out on their own. The reason you don't see them hanging out on their own is on account of the fact that usually they're part of a bigger battery, or they're part of like a little armor division. Okay, so the one at high altitude can't do anything about. The one at low altitude, however, again, remember this thing's about 400 feet off the ground, and it's pretty darn flat here. And notice we can now fire a missile straight at its nose again. That is a massive improvement over the SA-7. Granted, the PK on these things is pretty garbage, and anybody who's played any game that involves, kind of shoulder-launched SAMs can attest to the fact it's extremely difficult to try to shoot down stuff like that. It just doesn't happen very often. So even though this is an improvement, it's not the best. Which brings us to the SA-15. So anybody who knows anything about modern NATO techniques here will probably tell you a little bit about our wonderful helicopters. As a matter of fact, anybody in our world and any armed forces will tell you about their wonderful attack helicopters. So what happened is we had those earlier systems like the SA-8, which you're probably familiar with, which were pretty darn good at engaging all sorts of different targets. But the problem is they couldn't engage more than one at a time. And the time from, hey, there's a helicopter about to put a Hellfire through my front windshield versus I can get a missile sent into that helicopter time was way too long. So the Soviets and Russians at the time developed this really, really slick system called the 9K330 Tor, which is also known as the Gauntlet. What this has, you can't see it well here, is these little tiny doors on the side. Each one has this little tiny missile that shoots straight up. Meanwhile, you've got a gigantic fire control radar on the nose, and you actually have a little search radar, which we can't see here. This meant you could fire in 360 degrees of direction without having to point the whole entire SAM battery at it. You could put 3 or 4 of these things in like an armored column and protect the whole column at very, very short range. So let's go ahead and get ourselves our handy-dandy targets one more time. We'll go ahead and do 2. Notice it has 16 missiles ready to go. It is a little different from a lot of the other platforms we've seen so far. Very few have quite that much firepower. But because this system was optimized for low-altitude, extremely quick attacks, it is not going to have an easy time of hitting things that are up high. As a matter of fact, you can see that this target, who's completely in range, can't be touched because it's just a little bit too high up. On the flip side, this one has already got 3 missiles moving at tremendously high speed. Again, look at these missiles. They're doing Mach 2 and they barely left the barrel at an altitude of 200 feet. And they're already basically coming to say hello to that poor F-16 here, who's about to take it in the front windshield. Ugh, messy. So you can see that this system was basically designed to protect, armored columns, frontline people from angry helicopters. And it's a really, really good system at it. Which brings us to the SA-16. So we all know that the Strela, which again is the Arrow, did a pretty good job. It was fairly successful. But again, we wanted to make that technology better. Now we're starting to enter into the modern systems. Now these systems are quite a bit different from some of the later systems in that they tend to be more reliable, they tend to be more immune to countermeasures, and all in general, they're pretty good systems. All right, let's go ahead and speed up time a little bit here. There's my drones. I wonder how many drones I've gone through this week. I was playing with this one a little bit earlier, just kind of experimenting with it. And yeah, I went through a lot of drones. I kind of feel bad about that, but maybe not. I don't know. So anyway, the Igla 1 is a bigger version of the Strela. I don't think we have a good picture of it here, which is kind of a bummer. You have to imagine you're taking the the original SA-14. Yeah, the SA-14, I was right. Yeah, I was right. That particular one, you're basically improving its seeker warhead, and you're trying to make it a little bit more stable, a little bit more reliable. But again, you're going to be sacrificing the fact that you're not going to have a very large warhead in this particular one. So first of all, our high-altitude target, you can't put a missile into the side of it no matter how hard you try. It's just too darn high. We can't do that. On the flip side, our low-altitude target, which as anybody knows are very difficult to engage typically, is not going to enjoy this very much at all. All right, that missile's going off. And I think that one missed. Here comes the next one. Notice it is a slower missile than its contemporaries. Fly right over the top, and we'll go ahead and get them a couple tail chases too while we're at it. We're in minimum range, we can't fire, and we should be able to get a couple tail chasers. There's the tail chasers. It's going to be a tough shot. Yeah, it's going to get out of the range long before the tail chaser can catch up to him. Nope, not going to happen. Bummer. So you can see, even though it's a more modern system, it's still a man-pad, guys. It's only got a 1.5 kilogram warhead. That's not much. Which brings us to the SA-17. So everybody loves the SA-11. It's a tremendously good weapon platform, except for the fact mine's got a giant hole in the ground right there. Actually, that's the SA-12. So they took that system and they modernized it. So everything that was good about it, they made even better right in the late 90s here. And they brought out the SA-17, which not only had all the capabilities of its predecessor, which is the kind of the Buck Mark 1, if you want to think about it, but it kind of enhanced everything that went along with it. You had a better radar, and you had something that made it really, really deadly. And they brought in some generic television cameras, which made it possible to identify targets at longer ranges. So let's go ahead and now get ourselves some more victims here. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, let's go ahead and unpause. There's my victims. So now you'll notice that I actually click on these targets, and I'm actually able to identify these targets because of the camera on board that particular SAM platform. The reason that this is possible is because it's such a sophisticated modern camera. So I'll go ahead and select these two folks right here. They're about to have a bad week. Look at how many those missiles have ready to go. Well, let's be good. Let's go ahead and allocate 3 each, which is going to be way more than enough. Now, people who know their history know the fact that back in 2008, Georgia and Russia had a bit of a to-do. I know that's under-exaggerating things just a teeny tiny bit, but the Tupolev 95 that was shot down by one of these SAM systems, which means that even though that traditional SAM systems are either good at high or low, this system now had the range and capability of engaging targets at high or low altitudes, and it can track multiple missiles at a time, and it has the ability to engage several targets at the same time, which makes this system dynamite. All right, there's our little F-16A. He's just kind of chilling there, just kind of doing his thing. I don't know how he's evading. I guess my drone operator is extremely good at his job here. He's doing what everybody does. You got to lose as much altitude as possible and dump basically a giant stack of chaff behind you and cross your fingers that nothing happens. And you can see my SA-17s. They're just going to go sailing right on by. Nicely done, F-16 drone pilot. You get an A for the day. Meanwhile, you'll notice these missiles decided to follow him straight down anyway and caught up to him. Ooh, look at this one. Look at this one. Wow, lost him. So our F-16 buddy actually dove below the basically altitude of the actual weapon itself. So that was really, really good evasion on the F-16's part, which proves that even though you have these sophisticated missiles, it will not save you from good old flying either. All right, you're going to need 3 more. There you go, have 3 more. Now notice I can fire multiple missiles at multiple targets at the same time. And you can actually see the predicted paths of these weapons as they're traveling. We're trying to hit him where he's going, not where he's coming from. But notice, once it gets there, it will start turning and flying towards the target, giving you plenty of time to maneuver. So in this case, we were actually able to outfly that missile just by turning around, something you don't always get so spoiled with. Unfortunately, we're going to have to pop a couple more of these into there. Yep, it's not going to track. And it flew right past him. Remember, this guy's only 400 feet off the ground here. This, by the way, is also my range officer, is my SA-17. All right, he's coming in nice and low, nice and low. Eat missile. And let's see what happens this time. Ooh, splash. So again, amazing system, but there's some limitations in the way it was engineered. Which brings us to the SA-18. So the SA-18, now if you remember, we had the Igla, which was the kind of early one. That's, again, the 16 version. The Igla 2, or the kind of the modern version, we call it the Grouse, is an upgraded version of that system. So again, we're talking kind of an incremental upgrade here. We haven't done anything excessively amazing about it, but at the same time, we certainly have improved some of the basic properties of it. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up time here. Give myself a minute to go ahead and acquire those 2 handy-dandy F-16s. Is something going on with my range radar? Usually we acquire them a little bit sooner, but that's all right. Let's go ahead and grab my my Grouse. There he is. Keep getting a warning that I see something, but I just don't see anything. Interesting. Let's see what all that sound is about. Did somebody drop out of... Where is it? Interesting. I'm actually just going to quickly reload the scenario to make sure everything's going okay here. Again, I don't want anything to go too funky. Okay, looks good. Let's go grab my SA-18 again. Go ahead and fire things back up. And let's see if that fixed it. There we go. All fixed. Good. I'm not sure what that was about. All right, so we'll go ahead and grab these 2 drones. We're going to go ahead and fire 3 of these little man pads into each one of them. Speed up time a little bit. And we should be about close enough to go ahead and do our fun part here. Grab this one. Let's see what happens. So first of all, our high altitude guy, we can't do anything. There's no such thing as a high altitude man pad. It's just not a thing. On the flip side, this guy is at 400 feet, has already gotten launched at, and you can see these things are sounding right into his... Done. This is such a better system than the earlier ones. Okay, so now things are going to get interesting. So if you remember, we had the SA-15, the Tor, which was basically designed to go ahead and engage helicopters or anything flying low altitude. The Tunguska, which is the 9K-22, also known as the SA-19, was designed to take that capability even further. What they did on this particular one is they combined the capabilities of the Shilka, which is the Zeus, as everybody likes to call it. That's a 23mm cannon. And they decided to combine it with really, really effective command-guided missiles as well. So basically what you did is you took everybody's favorite Shilka, you gave it a better autocannon. I think it's like a 2A46. I forget which model it is. I always forget that one. 2S6, sorry. And what they did is they mounted missiles to it as well. So now you have a super Shilka. So let's go ahead and try this platform out. So I'm going to go ahead and press this button here, press execute, press OK. Go ahead and press play again. I'm going to wait until my range radar can go ahead and acquire it. There they go. I'm going to go ahead and order up these 2 targets to be engaged. Notice I can fire either system here. So we'll go ahead and give them a burst of autocannon fire. We'll give them a burst of missile fire. And we'll just kind of let time speed up a little bit here. Getting a little bit closer, getting into range. Flip on my active radar. Notice I have a relatively simple radar here. It's nothing too sophisticated. So our first target at high altitude flies right over us again. Again, you can't have both, even in modern times. On the flip side, our low altitude target is about to get shot at a lot. Now, one of the problems with this system is it's a very, 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 very fast missile. Like, stupidly fast missile for how small it is. But it's also a line-of-sight missile. It doesn't have any special... Splattered. You can see it did a nice job. Now, of course, if we got two hit this platform, yes, I know he's sitting in a river. We could have gone ahead and shot him with our autocannons as well. And those are lethal autocannons. So again, this is like an improved Zeus. Now we get to the serious systems. Okay, this is going to get interesting. Enter the SA-20, also known as the S-300, which you remember that one from before, PM-1. This is the modernized version of the air defense version of the SA-10. Of course, it's a modification 1. So this system is amazing. If I actually take a look real quickly here, you can see this one came out in 94, was the original version of this, but there's actually a more modernized version of this, we'll take a look at. So this system basically takes everything we loved about the SA-10 and brings it up to 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself some drones. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's, quite a few. That's 8 drones. So I'm going to go ahead and flip on my little radar on here. And look, notice we've already started to acquire the targets, and we've got an extremely reliable lock on each one. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. Let's see here. Notice we have an SA-16 as a backup. 1, 2, let's go ahead. Let's be polite. We'll give everybody 3. Watch this. And missiles away. I guess you didn't expect that. But this missile battery has the capability not only to engage everything I just threw at it, but it actually fires its missiles in a parabolic arc, giving it the capability of launching extremely long range. Let me show you what I mean here. Let me actually zoom in on one of these missiles. Look at how high up that missile is. And then after the missiles climb, they slow down and they come back down to Earth, giving this thing a staggering lethality that you... Oh, are we in the middle of the water? Apparently that's not a country. Oh well, cool, whatever. Giving it a staggering capability to engage targets at extreme range. But wait, there's more. So I'm going to go ahead and these poor guys are going to start maneuvering when they see this thing arriving at Mach 6. Mach 6. This is real time. Watch this. Here comes the missiles. And that's going to be the end of that little... Oh man, I'm glad I don't have to pay the budget for these drones. Now, the cool thing with these missiles is these can actually retarget. So if we had another target right here, they could actually take a left and start following the new target. Unfortunately, it's going to be out of the line of sight. And remember, these are my low altitude bogeys. All right, we're going to speed up time here. So again, now we have a super duper ultra long range version of the ART Extremely Dynamite. Notice how many missiles we just fired. This is insane. Splat. What was that? That was 32 nautical miles away. So again, this system is insanity. It has tremendously long range. It has a missile that travels Mach 6. It has a pack of about 48 of those, depending on how big your battery is. It can engage in 360 directions. It can hit high targets. It can hit low targets. It can hit jamming targets. And it's absolute dynamite. It can even shoot down ballistic missiles, which is really scary. So with all that in mind, you're sitting there going, well, I guess that's the best SAM. The Soviet Union, or I should say the former Soviet Union, Russia, will never need anything better. Yeah, enter the S-400. Now, I've done an entire video dedicated to demonstrating how lethal this thing is. But just to kind of reinforce some of that, the S-400 is basically, they literally call it the Triumph. I think you can understand why they call this thing basically the Russian word for victory. Now, because of this is a very modern system. It has an amazingly capable radar. By the way, there is a secret nobody notices. There's no built-in TV camera. So this thing has the capability of all the other S-300s before it, except that it has an extremely long range of 135 nautical miles. To make things even worse, and this is what really scares people about this particular system, it has no difficulty engaging precision-guided munitions, it has no issues with hitting people at any altitude, and it packs a 123-kilogram warhead on it, which gives it a staggering lethality. So, of course, you're sitting there going, well, that's the end of the world. We can't do anything now. It's not invincible. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and order up some drones here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That should be enough drones to keep it busy. And you know what? While we're at it, we're going to go ahead and get ourselves one of these ballistic missiles. And again, we're just making things interesting today. Let's see here. There's the Triumph. We're going to go ahead and give them, all. Okay, let's see what happens. Switch to. Let's go grab my SA-12 again. My 21, my Triumph. There's actually a B version of this, which is even more lethal. And we're just going to go ahead and allow it to do free fire. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let the battery do its work for it. So one of the big differences between the early S-300 and this version is this one is not completely autonomous, but it has a computer on board that can actually do a lot of the work for you. So in this case, missiles away, splash, and off it goes. Now notice. And it's already engaged those, and it's engaged, and it's dead. So you can see that even though I hit it, it's not dead. Oh, that did it. So one of the rare times when an S-400 was actually defeated by a combined attack, but you saw it had no difficulty launching multiple missiles at the same time. And again, it's just, I think it's just dynamite, but it is not invincible. So people get a little scared. All right. So a lot of you are sitting there going, "Well, that system was amazing. How expensive is it?" It's a half a squadron worth of F-16s expensive, but it's still cheaper than a lot of the contemporary fighters and stuff like that. So somebody said, "Well, if I just have one cruise missile, I could probably knock that S-400 out of action." And people would say, "Actually, we agree with you." So what the Russians chose to do here is they developed this thing called the SA-22 Greyhound, which in my opinion is really just a replacement for the SA-8. This system is the Panzer S-1. Basically, if you want to imagine, I'm not going to get you a picture off Wikipedia because then I'm stealing other people's stuff. They basically took a simple little missile platform and mounted on an amphibious chassis, and it has the dedicated purpose of basically defeating enemy incoming missiles. So this particular one's actually pretty cool. It has an amazing little tiny radar on it. It's got great cameras on it. I actually saw a really neat video on YouTube where they showed you the interior of one of these, and you can see the way the cameras work. Let me just say, it's not cool. However, notice how short range its radar is. Again, this thing is not designed to be engaging anything too serious. It's just being designed to engage things like obnoxious, incoming missiles. But it does have a lot of the capabilities of everything else. Let's go ahead and get myself some drones. I feel like this S400, this guy's just like, he's chomping at the bit here. I'm going to just say Shift F1. I just want to deal with these airplanes. They're taunting us after that incredible little attack there. All right, I'm just going to let him take care of that while I go get myself some drones for my SA-22 here. Let's go ahead and get myself some drones too. That should be plenty. It's going to give me a total of 4 drones. Speed up time a little bit. Look at those missiles. Again, that's the Army version of the S-300. Oh, man, that was a waste. But too bad. It was fun to watch. Okay, so let's go ahead and lock on all my targets here. Notice we have both the 2A38, which is the same gun that they had on the SA-19, and notice we also have these Greyhound missiles, the 57 E6s. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one, and we'll be a little stingy here. That looks good to me. All right, let's see what happens. Now remember, the SA-22 exists for the purpose of basically protecting a bigger battery. That's not to say that it can't be used like the other systems, especially like the Tor. So here we go. Zoom in, let's see what happens. So these guys are traveling at 25,000 feet, and they fly right in and they get engaged anyway. Yeah, you can see my little catch there. I forgot that you had to get within the DLZ. So this platform suddenly now can engage high-altitude targets. So now we have a better SA-8. Whoops. Again, I don't like targets to get away, so I'm going to let that SA-19 do the deed for us there. Assuming you can. Oh! If you're wondering why that happened, it's on account of the fact that basically... All right, let him take care of it. Okay, cool. All right, let's concentrate on everything else. All right, so here comes my next round. Apparently, we've unallocated everything. That was kind of mean. Oh, because we re-identified them. Oh, that's not fair. Let's go ahead and grab that, allocate 2 of those, and release. All right, off they go. Notice how many missiles this thing can get airborne at a time. Remember, this is designed to stop the, JASSM spam, if you want to think about it kind of another way. And that is the end of that fight pretty darn fast. So one of the cool things you can do, and this is from a more strategy perspective, is if you go to Doctrine, you go to Weapon Release, you can actually tell it to only use its weapon against guided weapons if you want to, so it doesn't waste it on something stupid like a drone or an airplane or something like that. Okay, almost done, I swear. So next, we're going to take a look at the SA-23. This is also known as the NT-4000. As you can see, this is the Army version of the S-400 one more time. What makes this system a little unique is the fact that it has 2 different missiles on board. You can see we've got the pack with the 4 and we have the pack with the 2. Now, the reason I say this is if I actually pop them up, the SA-23A, this is the Gargoyle, has a really, really good range of 120 nautical miles. I'm sorry, that's the actual radar detection there, which is still pretty staggering. Has an 80 nautical mile range. Now, if you look at the giant version of the missile, it has a 120 nautical mile range. So now we're giving the Army the ability to go ahead and engage targets at extremely long ranges. Go ahead and get ourselves some drones one more time. I don't need that many drones. I just need enough to waste them. There we are. Go ahead and select this. We'll be a little stingy here. We'll allocate 1 giant each. And we'll allocate, let's see here. We'll do, what do you think? Well, 1 regular gladiator each as well. So now, not only are we engaging a target with missiles, we're also engaging with different types of missiles depending on what we need to do here. I believe we've already allocated. Yeah, we're good. Wait until he gets a little bit closer in range. I'm going to go ahead and open up my radar here so I can get a better look at what's going on. And weapons away. Go ahead and grab my giant here. This is the big one. Again, we're dealing with ranges over 100 nautical miles here. All right, you can see them getting the command link updates, and they start splattering my F-16. Whoop, did you see it retarget? Oh, you missed. So my high altitude guys did not stand a chance against that system. So again, this is kind of like a detuned version of some of the more lethal ones. I'll go ahead and grab this, and we'll allocate a whole bunch more, just in case. You know, I don't want to, you know, I mean, the guys who built the drones, they don't intend to land them somewhere. They're just going to use splattered. So you can see this is, again, a spectacular mobile system. All right, just a few to go, and then we'll call it a day. Next, we have the SA-24 Grouse. This is the IGLA S. I like to call this the super version of the IGLA, because unlike the previous versions, which were pretty good, this version is even more good. I know, I think the word is the best, but it's sometimes kind of fun to, play with English there. It is a dynamic language. As usual, you cannot engage high-altitude targets, but it doesn't mean you can't quickly engage low-altitude targets either. All right, zoom in on our little battlefield zone here. Whoop, and we splattered it. The first missile did the deed, even though it's a teeny tiny little warhead. Of course, the IGLA is pretty good, but can we do better than the IGLA? Enter the Verba. This is the SA-25. This is the 9K tree. This particular system is very similar to the IGLA that preceded it, except it's a little bit more modern. The warhead on it is much more effective. The motor on it's a little bit stronger, so you get a little bit better range. It also can engage targets at a higher altitude, but it still does not have that magical capability that everybody really, really wants to have, and that's the ability to go ahead and engage high-altitude targets with something that you carry around in a briefcase. That's just not a thing yet. Some point in the future that might be a thing, but for today it is not. All right, let's go take a look at the performance here, and we splattered that guy. Unfortunately, my range officer is going to have to get the guy at high altitude again, which brings us to our final two SAM platforms. That is going to be our handy-dandy SA-26. This is also known as the S-50. This is the Fight S. And, of course, the SA-27, which actually doesn't exist. Now, let's take a look at these two. So the S350, as you imagine, is going to be a derivative of the earlier S300 models. Again, this thing is extremely modern. It has this staggering, amazing fire control radar, which you can see is modern. It's got amazing tracking capabilities, built-in search capabilities. If you want to think about this system as another way, think of this like an Aegis system. So if I actually were to click on it real quick, let's go ahead and open up the missile itself. Notice it's engaged, it's a ballistic weapon. It flies at very high altitude. Notice percent of hit is 95%. Notice the engagement range that you can use this thing at. It also has the ability to engage high-speed targets. So I'm going to go ahead and do what we normally do. We're going to go ahead and throw a bunch of targets at it. But I'm also going to get my ballistic missile buddy to kind of help us out a little bit here, because I'm just feeling like this guy's a little left out today. I'm going to go ahead and press this. Oh, we ran out of ballistic missiles. It's okay. I'll get you another one. There we go. All the weapons. Okay, let's see what happens. This system was designed just like the US Aegis. It has a very similar system with the radar. Again, if you want to think of the spy radar, SPY, that's the one I'm referring to. It also has the ability, of course, to engage things on its own. It's autonomous. It can do high altitude, low altitude. It can point in almost every direction. And its missiles are fast. 2,100 knots. And you can see I'm already starting to track those ballistic missiles. There's the reentry vehicles. Here they come. But notice I can't engage the low altitude. Okay, pause. Something I want to point out real fast. You'll notice the weapons themselves have a built-in radar. That means that even if the target goes underneath a mountain, they can still be engaged by the system. Now you can think of just how terrifying that would be. So here comes our re-entry vehicles. They're entering the atmosphere at this particular point. Of course, our SAM battery operators are sitting here scrambling, and guess what? They're unable to engage them because the missiles are coming in too fast. Now it's interesting that even this incredibly sophisticated system, just got erased. All right, now we're on our last system. I really should have broken this up into two videos. I apologize for folks who kind of go all the way through this, but hey, some folks are interested in this. I'm going to go ahead and grab my SA-27. This system does not exist. It is actually still in the drawing boards. There's been some really neat little models that have come in the Russian press that you can study it. But basically, the SA-27, look at this, all stats guesstimated. It says it right on the thing. The SA-27 is basically this new, highly mobile, extremely fast-firing portable missile system with the purposes of basically engaging anything that's close by. As you can see, if you're familiar with the ship version of the ESSM, which is basically you got a bajillion of them on board, this particular platform will give you the ability to go ahead and engage tons of targets with a staggering 256 individual missiles. So let's go ahead and take a look at this missile real quick, just to kind of get some ideas. 12 nautical miles. Maximum altitude, of course, is 20,000 feet. So unfortunately, we still lack that ability to engage high-altitude targets, which, again, it's going back to what I've been saying this whole time. So let's give this thing something to do. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that should get it a little bit busy. I'm just going to say free fire on this thing. I'm not even going to bother telling it to do anything with this. Remember, this thing doesn't exist yet. This is a completely hypothetical platform. It's going to be funny in a few years when I have to do another version of these videos, and it's going to be concentrated around, the SA-33. Now notice we were able to instantly identify these targets with the fire control radar built into this particular system. That's because it has NCTR. It can actually look at the radar signatures of something and know exactly what it is. Notice our first group of F-16s are going to go right down to the range officer again. But our next group are about to get spammed. Again, this is totally hypothetical. So the first thing I want to point out about these missiles is they have their own radar, which means if you duck behind a mountain, it'll still find you. The other thing is it's traveling at Mach 3.2. So not only does it have no difficulty at all, basically tracking and slaughtering these F-16s, but this entire process was done in literal seconds. Now, if you were the pilot, this is happening real time. These things are actually traveling this fast. Let's actually go ahead and I'm at 2x right now. I'll fix that. If you actually were to follow one of these missiles in flight, let's go ahead and unpause and repause. There we go. Go ahead and travel this F-16. You've got to see how fast this thing moves. It is just it's just wrong. Again, this is a little tiny short range missile, and it has 256 of these. So you're bringing the battery of a ship with you. Let me go ahead and look at the front window here. Look at how low to the ground. I don't know why this thing thinks we're in water here. It's probably something on my part I messed up. Bye-bye, F-16. Oh, that actually missed. That never happens. But again, this is how fast these things are traveling. The F-16s look like they're walking compared to these weapons. And you have a staggering 256 of these things ready to go. So I'm super excited to see how this particular system evolves a little bit over time. Okay, hopefully this video has been helpful as far as kind of showing you off kind of what the contemporary modern SAMs of the, again, former Soviet Union, early Russian Federation kind of has. As you can see, the same basic limitations exist, except that they're just a little bit more capable at engaging multiple targets, and the missiles using kind of the classic cheese tactics of yore still don't work well. Enjoy.